every one of our clients' dollars is not attached to an investment. It's attached to a spending date, whether it be in a money market account, a stock, a bond, a mutual fund, whatever. We have to understand that these all have dates to be spent. Every single dollar we have will be spent by us today for lunch, let's say, by us tomorrow, maybe in retirement or our kids, something like that, or the church, or spent by other people after we die, but it will be spent on some date. And so, beginning with this idea that dollars have dates attached to them, you can back into the investments that you choose for those clients. So, just a good rule of thumb that I don't think Housel talks a lot about that. I do. I think it's important. I'm going to tell a quick story. Kurt Vonnegut, the great author, and Joseph Heller, the great author, I think he wrote Catch 22. They were hanging out when they were famous and alive with a famous hedge fund manager at the time. And they were all joking around. And I'm sure Joseph Heller was joking around because he was quite funny, as was Vonnegut. And the hedge fund manager said to Joseph Heller, who had written, I believe, the best-selling book in all of time. I think Catch 22 is right there. Or is it Catcher in the Rye? I can't remember. But nonetheless, the hedge fund manager said, I made more money today than you made on your book for your entire career. And Joseph Heller says, that may be true, but I have one thing you don't have: enough. And I think that's a very poignant story because there is a point at which we must define what enough means in your life or in the life of your client. Because if you say to your client, what do you want with your money? And they say, I want a second house. They actually haven't answered the question. When somebody says, I want another house, what they're saying, I want the comfort and peace or whatever that they believe that second house will give them. That's what they really want. And so helping your clients define what they really want, that will be enough, allows you to back then into the virtue which will actually obtain that thing, because the second house will not. So defining what is enough is really, really important. And I want to give you a couple of examples that Housel also used, I believe, of people that just didn't understand this idea, who were wildly successful financially. There's a guy named Gupta, I think was his last name. I can't remember his first name, but he was the former CEO of McKinsey. I think he retired in 06, 07, somewhere around there. He ended up going to become the board of director of 5 different public companies. He literally went from the slums of India to be worth more than $100 million. He was on the board of Goldman Sachs. In fact, he was on the board of Goldman Sachs, and he felt uncomfortable, and he talked about this in an interview, because they were all billionaires, and he was the only non-billionaire at that time on that board. He just had $100 million. And in 2008, remember, he had retired in 06, 07 from McKinsey. 2008, we had the financial crisis, and he was on the board of Goldman Sachs. You may have read a story back then, or read since then, that at that time, Goldman Sachs was approached by Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett made, I think, a $50 billion, some very large loan in a sense, through using preferred securities to Goldman Sachs to save them. He didn't make that to Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns, both of which failed, but Goldman did not fail. It might have been because Larry Summers became the Treasury Secretary, but that's a different argument. But nonetheless, Gupta knew about this in the board meeting. And so what did he do as soon as that board meeting ended, before this reached the news? He called his broker and said, buy me 175,000 shares of Goldman Sachs. He then went on to make another $1 million on that trade. Well, that call was recorded and eventually turned over to the Securities Exchange Commission. He was arrested, charged, and convicted of insider trading, as was his financial advisor. Why? Because $100 million wasn't enough for Mr. Gupta. And so he paid the price. Bernie Madoff, we all know the story of Bernie Madoff, but one thing you might not know about Bernie Madoff is he was a market maker. Everybody here knows what a market maker is. Bernie Madoff, he was at one point responsible for 9% of all trading activity on the New York Stock Exchange. 9%. So think about this. The greatest economy in the world, the greatest wealth creation thing in the world, which is the stock market, in the heyday of the market, so this is the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, and 9% of all trading activity was not enough for Bernie Madoff. And he lost everything. In fact, I believe his son even took his own life. We should pray for him. So I think whether you're looking at Joseph Heller or Kurt Vonnegut, or the negative examples of Gupta and Madoff, we must believe the idea that there isn't enough that we can find and potentially obtain. Do not practice extortion, do not falsely accuse anyone, and be satisfied with your wages. I don't know if that's something anybody is ever able to do, but we should be satisfied with our wages.